yesterday. I wasn't actually here. Day soon. Okay, Sophia, come on down. Mark, we'll have you come up.
하나님, 오늘 이 시간 여기 있을 수 있게 해주셔서 감사합니다. 오늘 하루도 강사님께 힘과 지혜를 주셔서 저희가 강의를 들을 때 하나님이 무슨 말씀을 하시는지 들을 수 있게 해주시고 열심히 공부할 수 있게 해주세요. 예수님 이름으로 기도드렸습니다. 아멘.
All right, sounds like we're on. Good morning.
Good morning.
Did you all sleep well?
Yes.
My strategy when I'm here for this short a time is to stay with the jet lag. I'm staying with the jet lag, so I wake up at like 4:30 and go to bed at 7. It's kind of ridiculous, but hey, then I don't have to adapt as much when I go back, right? So no worries for me getting up early. Okay, so let's look back at our syllabus. I actually changed it because I do these sorts of things. I think I have bought a little bit of time, which we will use today to show a film that I was involved in making this last year. So, so that will be today. So what we'll do today is we will finish up. We just have one more site to do for our virtual tour of the North. My home away from home, Bethsaida. And then we will do kind of the same rapid sprint through the kings of the south, look at the kings of Judah, as we did with the kings of the north. And I think we'll get through most of that by our break, we'll see. And then we'll do a couple of sites in the south, virtual tour sites in the south. Also, we'll do some virtual touring when we do the kings of the south. And then if we have time, we'll show the film, then the last thing today, okay? Then tomorrow we'll do Chronicles. Tomorrow, you've been reading Chronicles, right? Mm-hmm. So you're gonna have to do a lot of work for me here. So I want your considered perspective, your observations on the similarities and differences between Kings and Chronicles, in particular with respect to the kings of Judah. Okay, so we'll kind of go king by king, and we'll watch for similarities and differences as we go. So review your notes or whatever, give it some thought, and bring your ideas, the things that you picked up on, okay? Because of course, it's precisely in looking at these similarities and differences that we're going to be able to discern the difference in the author's intent when it comes to Chronicles, right? So that's how you get into the author's mind, is you see, I know what he was working with, now I see the changes, I know what's going on, because the changes follow certain patterns. Right? Yeah. You all noticed this. No, you didn't. You will soon. Okay. So, and then we'll finish up with a little bit of look at the prophets. So, today then, we go back to our virtual tour. We go now to Bethsaida. So first of all, the map. Now you all know about the map, right? You know how to pay attention. So you got red, dead, med, and Galilee, right? Red, down here, Red Sea, dead, med, red, dead, med. Not hard, right? You can do this. Red, dead, med, and Galilee. But it's a lake, so. All right, so the Galilee, the Sea of Galilee, or called in the Hebrew Bible, Kinneret, in modern Hebrews call it that, Kinneret, or the Sea of Tiberias, it's called in the New Testament, or the Sea of Galilee, or the Lake of Kinneret. That's that thing. It's a freshwater lake, not a huge lake, pretty deep, but not a huge lake, about 600 feet below sea level. And Jesus, remember, spent most of his ministry kind of around here, kind of the north reaches of the Sea of Galilee. Nazareth is kind of over here, but he spent most of his time kind of around here, Capernaum, Bethsaida, Chorazin, places like that. So, we are going to Bethsaida. So Bethsaida is, from the New Testament point of view, Bethsaida is the home, it's the home of Peter and Andrew and Philip for sure. So 3 of Jesus' 12, Peter, Andrew, and Philip. And because Philip was good friends with Nathanael, maybe Nathanael, although some disagreement on that, And because Peter and Andrew were partners in a fishing business with James and John, they may well also have been from Bethsaida. So you have at least 3 and as many as 6 of the 12 were from Bethsaida. So it's kind of the city of apostles. It was a place where Jesus did quite a bit of activity. It was near Bethsaida that Jesus walked on the water, for example. He healed a blind man at Bethsaida. He was, the feeding of the 5,000 was somewhere in the vicinity. So, a lot of important stuff with respect to Jesus in relation to Bethsaida. In the Old Testament, we're not quite sure if it shows up or not. There are 2 theories. One theory is that in one list of cities in the book of Joshua, there's a reference to a city of Tser. So Bethsaida, so Beit means house. Saida means fisherman. So Bethsaida. So if you just take away the Beit, Said, this fisherman place, that would be the name of the place, Said. In Hebrew, the difference between a D and an R is one little tiny line. Well, I can't describe it to you, but anyhow, it could be that Tser is actually Sed, and if Sed would be the root of Saida, which is fisherman. So maybe that's a reference to Bethsaida, but you saw how many gymnastics I just had to do there, so that one I really question. But it is pretty clear that it is the biggest city in the realm of the kingdom of Geshur at the time of King David. So Geshur is this area, what we now call the Golan Heights, those mountains between the Sea of Galilee and Damascus. So kind of the borderlands of Israel now, and Syria is right here, there's Damascus. It is the biggest city that's been found in that area, therefore it is probably the capital city of the Geshurites. And so when we read about King Talmai of Geshur, and we read about David's wife Ma'akah, the daughter of King Talmai of Geshur, and we have several of her daughters who are also named Ma'akah, who are part of the kingly line, and we read of Absalom, the daughter of David and Ma'akah, who rebels against David and goes up to stay with his grandfather during the rebellion. That's probably all going on at Bethsaida. Okay, so I think that probably the city was named Geshur as the capital city of the region of Geshur. Go figure. But nobody asked my opinion. So anyhow, that's what we're going to go look at. So right here, just east, so the Jordan River comes down, remember, from Mount Hermon through Dan, and then comes down here through the Hula Swampy Lake, and then on past Chatzor and down into the Sea of Galilee. Just to the east, I'm talking about a few hundred meters to the east of the Jordan River, where it enters into the Sea of Galilee, that is where Bethsaida is. In antiquity, it was on the shoreline. There was kind of a lagoon system there, so it was a really good place to park your fishing boats and go out and ply your trade. Today, it's a little over a mile away from the water, because there's been floods that have kind of pushed the sand down and made kind of a sandbar out in front and separated the city from the water a little bit. So it doesn't look obviously like a fishing village now, but it did in antiquity. So we're going to go now to Bethsaida. And we're of course going back to the Virtual World Project. You can see that the excavations, we've been working at Bethsaida since 1987. I have been working at Bethsaida since 1994, and have been one of the directors of it. In fact, you see a bibliography here, and these volumes, the Bethsaida research volumes, I published articles in 2 of those. Here is the site. We've broken it up right now into 3 areas, area A, B, and C, going from north to south. I'm sorry, south to north, so up is north. We're going to, our attention will be focused mainly on the south right now, because we're going to look at the city gate complex. Now, Bethsaida has not been restored at all. So what you're seeing is what was originally found. We have only a couple little places of restoration, and they're pretty easy to see. But Bethsaida, even though it doesn't look as impressive when you first look at things, it's because it's not rebuilt. But the thing is, what we found was actually more than the places that were rebuilt. So there's more original stuff there, so it doesn't have to be rebuilt as much. But I'll explain when you can see it. So first of all, let's go to the city gate complex. Okay, so the first thing I want you to see is all along here. Thank you. That's great. Thank you. All along here, you have a massive city wall with very, very large stones. So see that stone right there, for example, or that stone right there. These are now they're field stones. They're just the shape that you find them on the ground. This is kind of like here. It's a volcanic basalt region. So Golan Heights was a volcano. So you have the same kind of rocks you have here. And so you get these big boulders made of volcanic basalt. Some of these, let's say that stone right there weighs about a ton. To give you some sense of the scale. You know, it's heavy. These are big rocks. So this wall is in many cases 18 feet thick. So about 6 meters thick, solid wall. Now if we look outside, okay, you see this big paved plaza. See a very nice paving there from the Iron Age. You've seen this before. Where have you seen this? Big paved plaza out in front. Dan, thank you. Somebody's got a good memory for these things. And Dan, by the way, is not very far away. So we're talking the far north country, right? The big cities up here are Dan, Hatzor, Bethsaida, up here in the north. Then you kind of come farther down over here, you get to Megiddo and places like that. But these are the big cities up here. So this is one of the big ones. What you are looking at, you're kind of looking down the road. So when you went to enter the city, you'd have to come toward the camera up this road. Okay? And you would enter, there's actually an outer gate right here. You'd have to come through and narrow down, go through the outer gate, come into the plaza and turn. Remember, you want to make the army turn. You turn, and the whole time you're coming along here, you've got a tower over here and you've got a tower over here, so people can do nasty things to you if you are a foreign enemy. Now, the construction that you're seeing right now, this gate complex, this paving, the wall, partially the wall itself, and the main gate complex, that dates from the 9th century, let's say just after the time of Solomon. But this city gate complex was first built in the 10th century. So where's the 10th century stuff going to be? Underneath, right? So you have to use your X-ray vision. Well, not too much because you have a hole. Okay? So that hole exposes the stones that made up the 10th century gate complex. And the 9th century gate is sort of a remodel job based on it. So we only see just a little part of it to verify that it was there, and you can kind of use your X-ray vision for probably how it was shaped. Eventually they might want to excavate that, but the problem is you always got to make choices with excavation. If you excavate this, you destroy all this. So you kind of have to make a judgment call, and right now the judgment call is let's not mess around. We've got a really nice gate here. By the way, the gate at Bethsaida, the 9th century city gate, is the best preserved and largest city gate in all of ancient Israel. Okay, so that's kind of cool. Now, as you enter town, the first thing you encounter is that. What is that? Yeah, what do we call that? Matzeva. Matzeva. We have lots of them. In the plural, it's matzevot, and we have lots of matzevot around here. And the shape of that stone, so a matzeva is a standing stone that represents a guardian deity of some sort. The shape of the stone that looks sort of like a gravestone, that's what we call a stela, or stela. Okay, that's the so you can have stelas for all sorts of reasons. Some stelas are also matzevot. These are matzevot stelae. Okay, so that's one of them. Now let's turn around and you can see Main Street. Okay, so here's where you enter in. So the army would have to come in and turn and go up Main Street. And the width of this gate is precisely the same as Hatzor, Megiddo, Gezer. Okay, same, just a little over 3 meters wide is the gate. And what do you have here? Yeah, matzevah. What do you have here? Another matzevah. So plural you have? Matzevot. Very good. See, oh, you're getting your Hebrew down. This is good. Okay. Oh, now wait a minute. What do we have here? What do we have here? A high place. There you go. A high place looking a lot like the one at Dan. Remember there was one right in the gate complex at Dan like this? We actually have 2 high places. Here's another one. Right there. This one's not as nice. But that one's pretty nice, isn't it? And if you zoom in and take a little bit closer look, woo! What do you see here? What? The water thing. That basin, remember? Yeah.
I have a question about the high places in the Matzevot. Wouldn't the people, as they return from exile and trying to live very holily after the law, wouldn't they have removed that stuff?
Yeah, what do you think?
Why is it still there? Would that have been there in the time of Jesus, for example, when he was there?
Ah, good question. All these are good questions. Yes, it would have been there in the time of Jesus. Yes, it would have been there in the time of the people who returned, but they didn't know it because it was buried. Okay. Now, also remember, this is not an Israelite city. This is a Gesherite city. Now, we've seen already Dan had them, right? So Dan clearly abides by this. That is an Israelite city. This is a Gesherite city that's through a marriage alliance hooked up with Israel. Then they have the same kind of stuff that Dan has, although a little bit fancier here, a little bit nicer complex, a little bit nicer masebot, etc. Of course, they don't have here what they have at Dan, that big temple complex and big altar complex and all this stuff that Jeroboam set up. Now, really interesting find here. All of these matzevot, look, you can see it right here. Look at that. What's going on? It's broken. The top's broken off. Do you see it? So they put it back on, but you can see the crack. Look over here. See that one? That's the top. Top's knocked off. Same deal here. Look at the crack. The top was knocked off. You might ask, why? Good question. Now, what you don't see here, I know I have to do something. Okay, first I'll tell you here's a little bit better picture. So one of the nice things they have here is stills. So, sometimes you don't get a great angle from the camera that you can move, but they also have still pictures that are high definition or whatever, so you can, high resolution, so you can look at it more closely. So here's the basin area that you can see. And now, right here, behind the basin was another matzevah. When this was discovered, one of our students discovered it, it was covered by a piece of stone. So they were excavating along, and they lifted up the big stone, and they revealed this basin underneath. And then they began to realize, oh, this is a high place, oh, this is something similar to Dan, etc. And then they lifted up the stone farther, and they realized they had quite a spectacular find on their hands. Because what they discovered was this. This is a stela, again, one of the matzevah, but this one's carved. The other ones are what they call aniconic, right? They don't have any symbols on them. But this one has this really remarkable carving on it. And by the way, if you've ever tried carved basalt stone, not easy. This is carved basalt. So you have a human body with the head of a bull, with the horns going in a very particular way, and a sword strapped across the waist. Okay? What is this? This apparently, they lavished more attention on this particular god than the other ones. This is probably considered the patron god of the town or something like that. This is a Baal. So you want to see what a Baal looks like? This is Baal Shin, Baal the moon god. That's why the horns shaped like the moon. Okay, this is Baal the moon god. And so he seems to have been in charge. He at least seems to have been important. And he sat, then, I can't really do this because I don't have any skill at such things, but he sat right there. Okay, right behind that basin, so that when you went in, and by the way, in the basin, remember I told you what they used? Like mugs, but they were had holes in the bottom, and you'd scoop out the water and you'd shake it on the stela, honoring the god. As you go in, those little mug things, the perforated mugs, were crushed inside the basin. So they were right there. So that's why we know of the use of those things. And so this stela, as you can see, was broken into 5 pieces. So you might ask, why? We see a pattern, don't we? All these matzevot were damaged somehow. Who did it? Why? That's a really good question. Okay, I'll tell you the answer. Assyrians. Assyrians. And why would the Assyrians do it? Yeah, why? What about the Assyrians do you know that would make them want to do that? Their god is better. What is their god called? Ashur. Ashur, and remember, he's one god above all the other gods, so his job is to basically show that he's stronger than the other gods. So how do you do that? They bring Ashur to town, and Ashur beheads the other gods. Right? And you can picture the people, can't you? Just grabbing this guy, because he's the most important one, and slamming him face down on his own basin, and he gets crushed into those pieces, and that's exactly how they left it and exactly how we found it. Isn't that cool? So a moment in time, by the way, who was the Assyrian king who did this? TP3. TP3. We'll talk more about him in a bit. Okay, so now let's go back to our gate complex. And here you can see how nicely preserved this is. Look at that pavement. Isn't that cool pavement? Really nice, smooth. People have been walking over this for centuries. And what do you have right here? Speed bump. Yes, there's your speed bump. And what do you have in the center of the speed bump? A higher stone. And what does the higher stone represent? Where the 2 doors come together. So the doors would be the other side of the speed bump, and they would close up right on that. I'm proud to say that I discovered the speed bump.
No way.
It's my speed bump, man. That's my claim to fame. I own that speed bump.
When you see engraved in it, Mark was here.
That's right. X marks the spot. Now, let's see. By the way, just so you know, I told you a tiny bit of reconstruction has been done here. This gate complex was preserved in its original form, in some cases up to 3 meters. So basically the roof, a little bit higher than the roof. So in some cases, that's how well it was preserved. There are a couple of cases where a friend of mine, Orna Cohen, is kind of the great guru of preservation of ancient things in Israel. She came in and she said, you know, we need to stabilize this or you're going to start to have erosion as things are going to start to fall down. And so see right here, she put some wood. So the wood sits on top and then a few stones on top of the wood. That kind of stabilizes the whole thing. So it's not really reconstruction, but it's just, so the wood is not original. Okay, below the wood is original. But you can see some areas like right here, for example, there you can see the full 3 meters of preserved height. Okay, so now let's go inside. Okay, so now we're looking from inside back out where we just were. Okay, so there's our big open plaza. Here's the door. Here's our matzevah. Here's another matzevah. Our high place is over here. And then look down. Oh, you can't see it very well. Okay, right here you can see it. Right there. And right there you can see it, but there's kind of leaves, so it's a little bit hard to see. But what you're seeing there is black. That is ash. What you are seeing, if you look at it from the top view, I don't have that picture here, but if you look at it from the top view, oh, I might have the picture. Wait, let me look. I have to show you if I have it. Oh, I do. There it is. Wait. So this is right after I discovered it. Go. Okay. No, next one. Okay. So now you can, so here's the center. This is just when we discovered it. So we only got part of it uncovered at this point, and there's the high stone from the middle right there. See it? Okay, so we're looking straight down on it, and look at right here. You can see the black. See the black? You can really see it right there. What is that? That's the door. That's the door. They burned it, and the door just became ash in a nice little stripe right where it's at. Isn't that cool? So there you can actually see it. Okay. Oh, this is the high place where we just go. Oh, wait, let me see. Oh, look at that! I put it back where it belonged. I'm such an artist. You got to be amazed. Okay, let's get out of here. Whoa, what are we doing? Uh-oh.
All gone now.
Wait. I think I know how to. All right. Now, get out of here. Oops. Where am I going? Here. Whew. Okay, we're back. So, that's the threshold. Let's now go full screen. And can you see the nice paving here? And look here. What do we have? What is that called? Chamber. And what do we have here? Chamber. What do we have here? Chamber. And here? And in between we have? Yeah, wall, which we call a pier wall. Okay. This chamber, by the way, was filled with broken pottery and Assyrian arrowheads. Right, so where the battle took place, where they finally took the city. We also have in this chamber, we had a bunch of grain that got kind of charcoalized, so mainly barley. So this is a grain storage area, at least in part. Whoa, look at that, nice day. Okay, look how big that chamber is. It's huge. It's about 3 times the size of Hatzor or a place like that. So even though this is a 4-chamber gate, it's huge. And it's really well preserved. So it's actually bigger in total size than the big 6-chamber gates built by Solomon, which tells you, this is a pretty important place. This is monumental architecture, right? Somebody that says King Talmai of Geshur or his descendants, somebody had some serious capacity to build something like this. Okay, so now we go on through our 6-chamber gate. You can see how nice the paving is here. This street is named after one of my students who discovered it. Her name was Jen Myers, so this is Myers Street. And now we go, you spend a lot of time in the dirt and the hot sun and you make stuff up. It's kind of fun. Okay, so now look back. Wait a minute, where are we? Look back. Okay, here's Main Street. And then once we get to the inside, what do we have here? Another matzavah. And then we have this paved area up here. And then we have this hole, this pit in the ground. This is another high place. And this pit was full of animal bones. This is a place where they have sacrificed animals in honor of their gods. So sort of like an outdoor temple complex in a way. Okay, now, all right, we'll overlook here. All right, now we can look down on the whole area and get a good feel for it. So there's the outside, here's the speed bump, where the door was. You can see the chambers. Here's that matzavah in the back. Here's another one here, notice beheaded. Here's the sacrificial high place and the pit where the animal bones were. And you can see, get a feel for what it's like to work at Bethsaida. You spend a lot of time with rocks. It's a very, very rocky place. And you've seen the Golan Heights off in the distance, and basically over that hill is Syria. Okay, so what we're looking at here, let's see. No, can't get there from here. Okay, so let's go to area B. So in between area A, we just looked at the gate. So here's the gate complex and the big walls. So the walls would continue along here. It's kind of ruined over here, and we have another chunk of it right here. Now I should tell you, Bethsaida, so in the 1960s, Syria owned this territory. Before the 1967 war, the Six-Day War, Syria owned this territory. Syria recognized, as did people in antiquity, that this site is very important strategically. It's a good site for your military to have control over, because whoever controls that site basically has sight lines to be able to cause a lot of damage to other people. What they did, the Syrians in 1960s, was they built a mortar battery here. So they have guns that shoot kind of overgrown grenades, right, mortars, from this place. So what they did is they built kind of bunkers and stuff. So they used bulldozers on top of this archaeological site to move stuff around to set up for all that stuff. And they put landmines all around it. So we only lose a few students a year, but we do have to watch for the landmines. The really hard part is when we first started excavating, we were excavating up on the top. The landmines were around the side, and the bathroom was at the bottom. And so it's kind of funny to watch the students go to the bathroom and dodging the landmines. And, eventually the Israeli military came through and ran a minesweeper through and basically blew up anything in the way and then cleared the way. Because of this, the bulldozers that they ran through, they kind of wrecked some areas. So the beauty of Bethsaida is, since about the 2nd century AD, nobody lived there, hardly. And so it was well preserved until the Syrians came in and set up this military outpost and then ran their bulldozers through. So wherever they ran their bulldozers through, they wrecked whatever was underneath. Of course, they didn't know they were doing it. But because of that, we have some preservation issues some places. The gate was safe. It was well preserved. What you're going to see now was not safe. It was not well preserved. The bulldozers kind of wrecked it pretty badly, but you can get some idea of what was there. Now, notice this pinkish color is basically from the time of King David. Okay? This 9th century gate, remember, was a little bit later, so it's on top of it, so it's kind of a whiter color. But over here in the pinkish color, we have this. And in between, by the way, is a not very well preserved paved plaza, kind of an open courtyard area. And then we enter the Iron Age palace. So what you are seeing is the palace, probably the home of David's wife. Okay, King Talmai's palace. See the great big stones that were used to make these walls, and you can see one wall clearly here, so the bulldozers didn't get to that. Here's another wall here, which is a very strange remodel and made for a long, skinny room. I don't know why they did that. You can see a back wall along there. You can see another wall over here. If we get into the middle of the palace, you can get a little bit different view. There's a couple of walls you can see fairly well. There's one of the bunkers that the Syrians put in when they were there in 1967. So you see some of you dig up Syrian junk every once in a while. By the way, when you're excavating and you find like bullets or like wires, stop. Right? You stop and call in the chief archaeologist, who also was in the military bomb squad, and he knows what to do. But so there is always, and I have run into time. One time I was using a big pick in a really bad area, and I ran into a whole cache of bullets. I ended up with a whole bucket full of bullets. Thankfully, I didn't detonate any when I was digging. But so it's a little, it's exciting being an archaeologist. Bullets and bombs, and you gotta love it. And lions and tigers and bears, oh my, it's great stuff. All right, so this is what we call, it's a particular style, typical of the Syrian palaces, called a Beit Hilani. So we call this the Beit Hilani Palace. This is the palace from the Iron Age period. So these are the main things that you can see that are from the 8th, 9th, 10th centuries BC at Bethsaida. And remember, a key ally in the northeast through a marriage alliance with King David. One other thing, so go back to the front and remember the door that was burnt. There's evidence of burning all over the place. Remember, evidence of burning is really important. Remember the Assyrian arrowheads that were found in the gate chambers. A big battle took place in the front of there. What happened? Well, what happened was Tiglath-Pileser III came to town. Remember, we have evidence both from Assyrian sources and from the Bible of this major campaign of King Tiglath-Pileser III in 732 BC. So we got a good date on it, we have good evidence for it, and it seems pretty darn clear that he was here. And it seems clear that the people of this town, whatever it was called at that period of time, later called Bethsaida, that town got torched by the Assyrians. What happened? I think I know. What happened was, and here, let me go back. All around here, there's right in front of there, of course, we saw the black, but all around here was this burn layer. On top of the burn layer, in fact, I showed you a picture of this earlier, there was that red crumbly stuff. That was bricks, and I said it was mud bricks. So on top of these stones, there apparently was a mud brick wall going up, maybe into an arch or something, we don't know. It was covered with white plaster, so this whole thing would have been gleaming white at the time. So you wouldn't notice that it was stone at the bottom and mud brick up above. And you had this door closing in the center. Now, one thing that we know from working at Bethsaida every year is every day we start working at 5:30 in the morning. We go and we start excavating because it gets hot there. So you go in the cool of the morning and you work for a couple of hours. We have breakfast out on the site. About 11 o'clock, we stop and and the popsicle goddess arrives. The popsicle goddess is highly worshipped when you do our excavation. She shows up with popsicles just about the time you're roasting because it's getting hot, it's 11 o'clock, and everybody's, where's the popsicle goddess? We need the popsicle goddess. And they bow down and worship and get a popsicle. Like I said, when you've been in the sun too long, you do weird things, but especially for a popsicle. It's like the best tasting thing in the world under those circumstances. And then we work for another hour or so, and then we leave. Part of the reason we leave, usually a little before noon, is because you are at 600 feet below sea level. And what happens is, as the day warms up, you get this convection current going from sea level down into this hole where we are, and it gets this massive wind storm going pretty much every day. So we're keeping records and making drawings and have all these papers around, and it starts to get really difficult after a while when the wind comes up, and so finally, and of course you get dust in your eyes and that sort of stuff. So, but it gets very windy, so much so that if you are on the east side, so there's a kibbutz right over here called En Gev. So the wind kind of goes like this. So on the surface of the Sea of Galilee, you get this very strong wind going in the easterly direction, pretty much every day. So people over here at En Gev, they can actually surf. So they get some serious waves going on across this lake. I used to make fun of the Jesus' disciples, these fishermen who get scared when they have waves on a lake. I'm saying, waves on a lake, give me a break. They're not very big. Actually, they are. They get pretty big on that lake. And it happens regularly just because of the heating of the afternoon. So Tiglath-Pileser III figured this out pretty quickly. And so he just smiled and waited until about noon and told his men, shoot fire arrows. Right? They shot fire arrows into the wood that held up this big structure, into the wood of the door, etc. And just use that wind. Get that firestorm going. And it got so hot that the mud brick, the bricks that a lot of it was made of, melted. Bricks melted. You know what it takes to melt bricks? A fire of 1,200 degrees centigrade. That was a really bad day for the people who lived there. That's what happens when the Assyrians come to town. Just as a commemoration, this is from the excavation there right by the gate, right by the threshold of the gate. This might look familiar. This is what we call a clinker. Volcanoes produce these because they're that hot. A clinker is melted stone that's sort of congealed. And you can see in this melted stone there's white plaster, which was remember the whole area was covered with plaster, so you have these mud bricks that are covered with plaster and they melt and become lava, basically. So this is a clinker caused by that fire on that day when Tiglath-Pileser III came to town. Touch a piece of history. Now, how's our time? Okay, let's go. I want to do one more thing if you don't mind, and that is, since we're here, take you to the Bethsaida that Jesus knew. So here I have something I don't have time to show you, a long PowerPoint presentation on archaeological sites related to Jesus in the Galilee. We're going to go to the end. Okay, so here's Bethsaida from the side. That's where the minefield is. Those signs actually on the fence say danger minefield. And here is the what happened to the Sea of Galilee. So on the left, on the right is what the Sea of Galilee looked like at the time of Jesus. We've actually had a whole geology crew in here trying to reconstruct what the lake was like. It was like this, and so you see these lagoons coming right up to the foot of Bethsaida. So it's a perfect place to dock your boat and that sort of stuff for a fisherman. But today, here's Bethsaida and here's the lake. Notice here, and here's the Jordan River coming down. And this was caused by a flood upstream. A landslide caused dirt to block the river. It filled up, broke the dam, and it gushed down with all the alluvial silt and sand and whatever, and created this, which is kind of a nice agricultural plain now, but it's just a floodplain that pushed the sea away from Bethsaida. When you get up on top of Bethsaida, you discover this house. This is a large courtyard house, built a little before the first century, but inhabited during the time of Jesus. We have pottery from the time of Jesus, but we have a little bit that's older than that as well. And you see the wall right here going along this courtyard. You see this paved courtyard in the middle, and then you have rooms that are not very well preserved because bulldozers went through them, but we have these rooms around the outside. So this wall right here in the reconstruction is this wall right here, and you can see the rooms around the outside. Inside this house were discovered things like boat anchors and fish hooks and lead weights for fishing nets. So this is a fisherman who lives at Bethsaida, the house of the fishermen on the Sea of Galilee. Peter and Andrew were fishermen on the Sea of Galilee who were from Bethsaida. Is this their house? We don't know. Maybe a little bit doubtful simply because it's kind of a nice house. Kind of a big house, but who knows? Maybe so. So anyhow, that's the fisherman's house. Right next door, we have another house. The bulldozers did a worse job on this. You can see where the bulldozers went through here, right? All that area got ripped up by the bulldozers. But this is also an open paved courtyard. You can see the courtyard here. This wall right here is represented by that wall right there in the reconstruction. You can see the nicely preserved rooms around it. One of these is a kitchen. We have a nice oven and cooking pots in the kitchen and that sort of thing. And if you see protruding out the back of this house is this strange construction. Looks like a cave kind of going into the ground, and it has these rock beams. It's only about this wide. These rock beams across the top. What's going on with that? The very first day I excavated at Bethsaida, I showed up there and they had just discovered the top of this. And everybody's saying, what's that? And so my friend, who was a religion professor at our college, he's about 6'4" and 270, big dude. And he said, I want to excavate that. So Denny Clark, my friend, went in that little hole and excavated for 3 weeks. And when he got to the bottom, he found a bunch of pottery, much of it still intact. They were wine jars. This is an ancient wine cellar. So how many people can say you send your religion professor to Israel to excavate and he spends 3 weeks in a wine cellar? You know, I think that's pretty impressive. There's the wine jars down in the hole. Here, right on top of the gate complex. Now, somebody asked about the gate and you know, was this there at the time of Jesus? Yes, and all those matzevot and stuff, but they were buried because what happened when the Assyrians did their fire, the whole thing collapsed. That mud brick collapsed into the middle and buried the whole area, so what it made was kind of a flat, open area. That's what people saw in Jesus' time. So a good place to build something. So the Romans come in under Herod Philip, the brother of Herod Antipas. Herod Philip comes in and he builds a temple. Right on top of that flat area that was made by the collapse of the ancient gate. He didn't know an ancient gate was under there. All he knew is he had a good flat area to build on. And so he built this temple. You can see one wall here where this woman is measuring. You can see a back wall here. So this wall on the drawing, that wall is this wall. Okay. Back wall here is this one. That's this one right here. You can see a wall in between with an opening, kind of a doorway. That's that one right there. The right wall over here you can't see very well in this picture. But it's kind of a long, skinny temple. This is a temple probably built in honor of the wife of Augustus when she died in the year 30. She died in 29, so the temple was built in the year 30, and the city was renamed Julius in her honor. So here we have the imperial cult, the empress being worshipped in this temple at this place at precisely the time Jesus came to town. The city of Bethsaida being elevated to a status it had never known before, attached to the imperial family, reaching the high point of its glory in its history, just at the moment that Jesus came to town and said, "My kingdom is not of this world." What a fascinating moment in time. There's an artist's reconstruction of what that temple looked like. Now, my first year excavating at Bethsaida, yes, that young person is me. Wow. Have you aged badly? I got that. I got the implications of that. I had hair, like darker. Anyhow, I excavated in the low rent district. So I excavated this house that was about 4 meters by 3 meters. The whole house. They were so cheap they didn't even build 4 walls. They hooked on, this is the city wall. This right over here is the city wall. So they basically built 3 walls and attached it into the city wall. Nice. The house consists of 2 rooms. You're seeing the whole thing right here. There's 1 room, little wall, doorway, other room. Okay, that's the whole house. So this is the cheap district. See this rock right here? A great big stone. It's actually, it's maybe it weighs about a ton. It's about this big. Takes up kind of a quarter of that room. I remember telling over and over again, I said to the archaeologists, remember we're in the heat a lot, and I said, you know, I think there's something really cool under here. Somebody has a safe under here. There's really something, you know, I want to move that rock and find out what's underneath it. And the archaeologist said, no, just work around it, keep working. And oh no, I want to look underneath it. No, I won't let you do it. Finally found out, you know what that rock is? It's the cornerstone of King Talmai's palace underneath.
Oh wow.
Of course, we didn't know it was there at the time. That's why you can't see it now. You actually can't see this house because they excavated the palace underneath. So now you can see the palace. You can still see that stone, but you can't really see the rest of my house. So in Jesus' time, this house was built in Jesus' time. In Jesus' time, that was the couch. Right? This old ancient rock that they built the house around, they just left it there, and that's the couch in the middle of the living room. And when I was excavating there, I made one of the important discoveries of that year. This is 1994. I'm holding it here in the picture. It was found right where the stick of that hand pick is, right there, and there it is. You should be able to recognize this. What is this? Yeah, oil lamp. Remember I showed you the oil lamp? Kind of looks like a pit. That's the spout of an oil lamp. You can see the bowl would be down here. It's the size of the one that I showed you. It's, small hand. I'm holding it in my hand here, but that's just a blow-up picture of it. And what kind of oil lamp? Herodian oil lamp, made when? Basically, exactly Jesus' lifetime. So what that is a diagnostic piece of pottery. Because it was on the floor of this place, it dates that house really nicely. Okay? So that is to say that this house was built and being used by people when Jesus was in town. So then we might ask another question, like, did Jesus visit this house when he was in town? We only have a couple of first century houses in town. There's a really decent probability he visited this house when he was in town. Is this one of his disciples' house? Of course, we don't know. Could be. Did Jesus visit this house and sit on that couch and talk to the inhabitants of this house about the kingdom of God illuminated by that oil lamp? The probability is actually pretty darn good. Isn't that fascinating? It's about as close as you ever get. So, there is my home away from home, Bethsaida. So now what are we doing? Okay, let's go now to the kings of Judah, shall we? So we're going to move to the south. The Weekly World News is, what happened here? There we go. The Weekly World News is where you need to go to find your latest archaeological information. You can find Goliath's skull. There it is. It proves the Bible true. The next story is Bat Boy. Born to a woman and a bat. It was very impressive. So anyhow, Weekly World News. That's the place where you want to do archaeology. So, you still have the stone. Oh, God. Anyhow, so, kings of Judah. Of course, the first thing I want to recall to your memory is David. David's about what year? 1000. And David made a new capital of Israel, namely Jerusalem, right? He conquered, it was called the ancient site of Jebus, the Jebusites, and he conquered the site, called it Jerusalem, and made it his capital. Of course, you remember Solomon now and building the temple there in Jerusalem. And we now have looked at David's palace, etc., probably. Here, of course, is Jerusalem. And some of these things we've already seen. So Warren's Shaft, you remember seeing Warren's Shaft? And here is the Ophel excavations. Here is the Bet David inscription. Here's the funny step that may be part of the retaining wall of Solomon's temple. I don't think I showed you this, did I? No. Okay, so what this is an ivory pomegranate. An ivory pomegranate. It had a little hole in it towards the top that's kind of broken out, and it would be hooked by a piece of thread onto a piece of clothing. And you can see on the shoulder of it an inscription in Hebrew, and it says, "For the holy priests of the house of Yahweh." For the holy priests of the house of Yahweh. Does this ring any bells, what this might have come from? By the way, it's about an inch tall. It's a little tiny thing. Any ideas where this might have come from? What? Yeah, the ephod. The ephod of the high priest. Remember that? So this may well be part of what the high priest wore. Yeah?
Is this what they look like that hung from the capitals and the temples?
Yeah. Well, they would be carved in, right? They're not so much hanging, but carved in. But this is actually hanging off the garment. Okay, so the kingdom of Judah. So we now know the whole story about the dividing of the king, the Rehoboam, Jeroboam thing. The southern kingdom lasts longer than the northern. So we already looked at the big picture of the northern kingdom. The southern kingdom, they divide at the same time, 931, but the southern kingdom lasts longer. So altogether it lasts 344 years. During that period of time, we have 20 kings. And all of these kings, unlike the north where we had 4 different dynasties, here we just have one, right? They're all the descendants of David. So that's important, obviously, for the Hebrew tradition, the line of David. Okay, so let's go then, first of all, to Rehoboam. You see his dates, you see where he's treated in the text, and a few things that you want to keep in mind about Rehoboam. Remember the Shishak attack. So the Shishak attack happened during his reign. Remember that because of the tensions between him and Jeroboam, there's periodic war between them. And Rehoboam established, or allowed to be established, high places and sacred prostitution. Now let me explain sacred prostitution in case you haven't learned about it yet. Think about this. Every ancient religion, one of the most important things about ancient religion, I mean, when you think about it, polytheism makes a lot of sense. With polytheism, you take the most powerful forces in the world that you can't control, and you attribute each one or a group of them to a god. And that particular god controls these forces. And certain forces are super important to your existence, aren't they? The biggies are weather and fertility. So generally speaking, in most polytheistic religions, when you have many gods, the most important gods are the gods that control the weather and the gods that control fertility. Now, what do I mean by fertility? Basically, stuff grows or it doesn't. And stuff growing is mysterious, isn't it? I mean, even now, you plant a seed and up comes a plant. Or, if you're like me, you plant a seed and a plant doesn't come up, right? And it's mysterious. Why? What did I do wrong? The birth of an animal. The birth of a child. You ever been there when a child was born? Any of you fathers? Were you there, mothers? Were you there when a child was born? Well, I hope the mothers were. Okay, if you're there when a child's born, there's something, it's huge. It sort of just reaches into your soul and grabs you. It's a big deal to have a child born. It was really sad. I was about a week before my daughter was born. She's 32 now. But about a week before she was born, I was out playing intramural football and tore my Achilles tendon. So I had to have surgery on my Achilles tendon. And when you have surgery on Achilles tendon, then you have a full leg cast, your toes pointed down, you can hardly move around. And my car had a clutch, and it was a stick shift, so I was my left leg, so I couldn't really use it. And I just got out of the hospital and my wife went into labor. And so it was in a snowstorm in Colorado, and my wife is going into labor, and we're supposed to we have about a 20-mile drive to Boulder, Colorado, and I can't drive. And so my wife has to drive herself to the hospital as I'm sitting there with my crutches on, and she has to pull over for contractions. It's great. Okay, I'm going in. It was memorable. It really was memorable. Then she was in labor 28 hours, and then finally gave birth to our child, and I'm there on crutches trying to stay up while she's on the table doing what she needs to do, and here comes our daughter, and I'm also on pain pills, so this is all rather interesting. Believe me, so is she. And anyhow, but all of a sudden, when our daughter is born, I'm standing there on my crutches, kind of wobbling around, and the nurse hands me my daughter. And I was like, just tears started gushing, and I was just like this blithering idiot, and they had to hold me up because I was like kind of unstable. And but this, for all the weirdness and silliness of this day, we still laugh about it. Although my wife doesn't laugh as much as I do. What a powerful experience to have a child. Well, this is about fertility. It's about life. In most ancient religions, fertility is controlled by goddesses for the simple reason that women own the secret of life. Always have, and so far as I know, always will. Right? Women own the secret of life. Men don't understand it, and it drives us nuts. But we sure appreciate it. And so it's very natural, isn't it, to associate the growth of crops, the birth of animals, the birth of children, all these good things that come into your life to one goddess, usually. Sometimes it's a god, but usually it's a goddess who is in charge of fertility. So you want to worship